I thought about this question, Kai, and I probably would also say jobs for Jay Powell. But since Courtney said jobs, let
Huh.
me talk about inflation for a minute. CPI. I
Okay.
mean, I think clearly the other side of the coin here for the Fed is what's happening with inflation, and you are hearing increasingly a bigger contingent of Fed officials who are worried about price pressures. Hey, it's not just the Fed, right? I mean, we saw this in all the conversation about the results of some big elections last week, and this
Yep.
affordability conversation about how are voters feeling. They're still feeling like the prices are still high. They have been for a few years, and price pressures are prevalent. So the thing here is though the CPI data that we would have been collected in October, the government was shut
Right.
down. So the folks who would be the government workers who typically are out collecting that, they haven't been doing it. And Trump administration officials have indicated we might not even have a CPI report to look at. So I think that for policymakers who are worried about defending against inflation, even absent any new data, they're just going to say, look, let's not cut rates until we know more. So I think Jay Powell wants to have a good and updated look at that, but they might not get that for quite some time.
Courtney, how worried are you about this thing that Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, said yesterday, which is that we may just not do October CPI? Deal with it.
Right. There's a question about whether there's going to be this just huge hole in our understanding of what happened with the economy in October. Kevin Hassett, one of Trump's top economists, seemed to suggest that maybe we get half the jobs report. Maybe we get the payroll number, but we don't get the data that actually the private sector data is not great at accounting for, which is the unemployment rate that's based on the household survey, as Kate said and suggested with respect to CPI. It's kind of similar with the jobs report. This is hard to kind of backtrack and fill in the gap, and it's almost impossible for the BLS to do that. So maybe with the jobs report, we only get half. And that's not very satisfying if you want a complete picture of how the labor market has been performing in recent months.
Yeah. Okay. I want to do a little Kremlinology on the Fed for a second, and here's the premise. You two are both longtime Fed watchers. You've been studying and reporting on the central bank for a long time. There is, as the three of us know, a growing amount of dissent within the central bank. And this is a central bank that really prides itself, and has for years, on having a unified, easy to understand message for the markets and to the consumers. Kate, you get to go first. How much does this new-ish revelation of disagreement among Fed governors and central bank presidents, the regional presidents, how much does that really matter? You got like 30 seconds.
I mean, I think it matters because it's the big challenge for Jay Powell as the chair. I mean, his job is to forge consensus. Now, does it matter if you have disagreement? No. I mean, there are certainly people who would argue it's healthy, but you made an important point, Kai, that it's kind of about helping markets and the broader public understand where the Fed is headed, what is likely to happen. So much of what they depend on is this forward guidance of signaling what they're going to do. And I think for the first time, you're really seeing not just people disagreeing, but disagreeing in different directions. Some people think that they shouldn't cut at all. Some people think they need to cut even more than they have been. So it's unusually divergent right now.
Courtney, over to you with an emphasis on that diverging in different directions thing that Kate said. That's important.
One of my sources said that this might be a preview of what the post-Powell era looks like. With Trump getting to put a leader in place, you might see more divisions at the Fed than we've been used to seeing under Powell. Right. And that's just a different era. And it comes at a very complicated time for the economy where there's concern about both the labor market and inflation. So maybe this becomes the new normal.
Courtney Brown at Axios and Kate Davidson at Bloomberg. Great stuff on this Friday. Thanks, you two.
Thanks, Kai.
Wall Street, it was a relatively calm end to a not so calm week. We will have the details when we do the numbers. Here is some old news for regular listeners to this program. Despite what President Trump has been saying for, well, forever, taxes are what tariffs are, right? And the costs are being passed down to American consumers and to businesses. I point that out because there is some new news from the White House on tariffs today. Because grocery bills are, in fact, going up, President Trump is going to carve out some exemptions from his tariffs. Details are scarce, but there's been talk from some in the administration that relief might come to coffee and bananas, other foodstuffs as well, from Ecuador, Argentina, El Salvador, and Guatemala. Marketplace's Kristen Schwab made some calls to see what that might mean.
Another day, another potential tariff change. And Noah Namowitz, COO of Cafe Imports in Minneapolis, has a lot of tariffs to keep tabs on.
Each country has its own unique rate.
From Indonesia to Ethiopia to Peru, the company imports coffee from something like 30 different countries, including some on the exemption list.
Open our computers every day and just figure out how we bring nice coffees to market.
He says any tariff relief helps, but it's likely not going to have a huge impact on prices. The U.S. imports about a third of its beans from Brazil, a country not on the exemption list. The tax rate for imports from Brazil is 50%. Meanwhile, coffee costs have been rising because of extreme weather.
So, there needs to be a couple other things that probably happen for the coffee market to actually come down.
Ricky Volpe, a professor of agribusiness at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, says a tariff exemption is welcome news because it could help slow inflation. But
it's not likely to bring food prices down.
There are so many other factors that influence the price of food, like cost of labor, transportation, and warehousing. Plus, there are other tariffs.
Pretty much every piece of capital that is necessary to get food from the fields to the supermarket is incredibly steel intensive.
Farm equipment, processing machines, storage shelves, the list goes on. Luis Rivera, an agriculture economist at Texas A&M University, says there's also the issue of policy perception, whether businesses think the exemptions will stick.
Policy can change from 1 hour to the next.
Uncertainty comes with costs for importers here, also for exporters abroad. Namowitz, the coffee importer, says his growers are worried.
Will my product be bought? Do I have a home for my coffee?
If growers of coffee or bananas or other imports shrink their crop or shut down, it could squeeze supply. I'm Kristen Schwab for Marketplace.
Consumers, of course, aren't the only ones looking for details on what those tariff exemptions might be. There are also all the people in the trade trenches, so to speak, customs brokers among them. We gave Gretchen Blau a call this morning. She's our customs brokerage manager at Logistics Plus. They're in Erie, Pennsylvania.
It's busy and it's confusing. It continues to be confusing with all these changes. So when I heard the news today, I went immediately to all the articles that, to Google to get all the articles on it. I went to see if there's anything official posted. So I went to the White House website and found the fact sheet. It states that there will be benefits to them importing into the United States, that they will receive better rates, but there's nothing specific on that. So I'm sure we'll be getting a lot of questions on that, and we can't give any details as of yet. So, but that's kind of how things have been going. We kind of are used to that, and the importers are getting used to that as well. Moving forward, we'll be watching for the details of, how this shakes out with the Latin American countries. We're also going to be watching the Supreme Court case regarding whether or not there will be refunds issued for the IEEPA tariffs. If that's the way the court case is settled, it's going to mean a lot of work on our part.
Going to be a big deal, that IEEPA case. Gretchen Blau, Customs Brokerage Manager at Logistics Plus, Erie, PA is where they are. Coming up.
He is one of the most in-demand people in Hollywood these days.
Honestly, whoever you're guessing it is, it almost certainly isn't. But first, let's do the numbers. Dow Industrial's off 3.9 points today. That is 0.6%, closed at 47,147. The NASDAQ rose 30 points, 0.1%, 22,900. The S&P 500 off 3 points. We'll call that flat, 6,734 there. For the 5 days gone by, the week that was, the Dow gained 0.3%. The NASDAQ lost about 0.5%. The S&P 500 notched up 0.1% on the day. Walmart ticked down about 0.1%. That on news that Doug McMillon has announced his retirement. New guy from inside the company taking his place. Bonds down, yield on the 10-year T-note 4.15%. You're listening to Marketplace.
Marketplace is supported by Yubico, makers of the YubiKey, protecting the applications and accounts that people and businesses rely on every day. YubiKey helps stop phishing attempts and hackers. YubiKey, still undefeated, the original passkey. More at yubico.com. And by Progressive Insurance. Progressive is currently looking for individuals in a variety of career fields who are interested in building a career and joining an inclusive and unique culture. More information, including application, at progressive.com/careers. And by Schwab. Schwab knows that investors want control of their financial future. That's why when it comes to wealth management, Schwab is dedicated to giving investors more choices. More at schwab.com.
Hey, Lula Miller here. I am the host of Terrestrials, a show all about animals and nature from Radiolab. If you've ever wanted to hear a story about an octopus breaking out of an aquarium, or a squirrel that can regrow its brain, or the wild stories unfolding inside a tree stump, well, we've got an episode for you. And did I mention, we sometimes break out into song? Join us, Terrestrials, over on the Radiolab for Kids feed. Listen wherever you get podcasts.
WNYC support comes from Drexel University, whose cooperative education program positions students to explore future careers and discover their ideal profession before graduation. More about experiential education at drexel.edu.
You're listening to Marketplace on WNYC. Coming up next hour on All Things Considered, we'll check in with a researcher on what Zohran Mamdani's win means for turning out younger voters. And WNYC's John Schaefer tells us what he's listening to this week in new music.
This is Marketplace. I'm Kai Rizdal. At the risk of repeating myself, and without ignoring all of the other ways in which it is a very high-profile issue right now, immigration is a labor market story. And obviously, the more immigrants a given region of the country has, the more of a labor force issue it is. A survey by the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas shows that 20% of the companies in its district, that's all of Texas, southern New Mexico, and northern Louisiana, 20% of the companies there say the Trump administration's immigration crackdown has hampered, or they expect it to hamper, their ability to hire and retain foreign-born workers this year. In this first story, from an occasional series we're going to call Help Not Wanted, Marketplace's Elizabeth Trovall looks at one slice of that workforce that relies heavily on those immigrants.
It's evening rush hour in Houston. Most workers here on the west side of town are headed home, but not Maria. Her cleaning shift at a nearby office high-rise starts soon, where she goes cubicle by cubicle cleaning up trash.
Ya va uno cubículo por cubículo.
Maria's in her 70s. We're not using her real name because she's afraid she could be targeted by immigration. She earns about $13 an hour at her cleaning job, which she enjoys.
Sí me gusta el trabajo. Me gusta por parte de ejercicio también.
You know, she gets her steps in. But she does come home tired, and she's been working extra lately. That's because roughly a third of her coworkers have had to quit since the Trump administration started rolling back work permits.
Una lástima que se los han quitado a muchos compañeros.
It's a shame they've left, she says. She's still able to work because the administration hasn't yet removed temporary protected status, or TPS, from Salvadorans. She and her colleagues keep showing up to work, but they're afraid.
Con miedo, pero ahí están.
She's been a professional cleaner for about 30 years in Houston. But if she loses her TPS...
Ya cuando digan no hay TPS, me voy para El Salvador.
Even though her kids and grandkids are here, she'll have to go back to El Salvador. Even though immigration raids are getting a lot of attention, economist Pia Arrhenius with the Dallas Fed says there's something bigger going on.
Hundreds of thousands, in some cases, maybe even millions of work permits are being canceled. And so that's really what's affecting employers most directly.
Not just people with TPS are losing their work permits, but other humanitarian migrants too, many who came in post-pandemic. And now border crossings, which usually offer a steady inflow of labor, have also been reduced to a trickle. So for employers who rely on foreign-born workers,
they're kind of getting squeezed on all sides.
At Houston City Hall, dozens of people are becoming U.S. citizens at a naturalization ceremony as they're serenaded by a barbershop quartet. These are people who don't have to worry about work permits or green cards anymore. I asked Alexandra, who came here from El Salvador as a teen, how she feels becoming a citizen.
Feliz. Muy feliz.
She's excited about voting, taking college classes, getting a better job.
Yo soy supervisora de limpieza, de housekeeping.
She's a supervisor of a team of around 50 professional cleaners.
Tuvimos una pérdida de casi 20 personas.
Her team recently lost about 20 workers, many from Cuba. They hadn't found replacements, so she's picked up some of the slack, she says. She actually studied for the citizenship exam while picking up trash.
Por eso yo estaba estudiando y sacando basura y todo eso.
The next day, I catch up with Alexandra's mom, Yanette, at a park near her house. She also cleans office buildings. She's seen good workers and good friends leave because they lost their work permits.
Se han ido buenas trabajadoras, buenas amigas.
She estimates about 20% of her team have left. And her company, which pays her $12.50 an hour, hasn't found replacements either.
Es mucho trabajo y poco dinero y pues duran quizás 1-2 semanas y se van.
The new hires last for maybe 1-2 weeks, she says, because it's a lot of work and the pay is bad. In Houston, I'm Elizabeth Troval for Marketplace.
This time of year, Thanksgiving-ish onward, is typically when we got a lot of new movies, films that the studios are banking on to be their big holiday hits. And whether you're itching to see the new Wicked movie or whichever number Avatar sequel this next one is going to be, you're going to have a decision to make. To IMAX or not to IMAX? They are just a fraction of the screens in this country, but movies shown in IMAX are a growing share of box office sales, and thus those screens are something of a hot commodity in Hollywood. Ben Fritz wrote about the big appeal of the very big screen in the Wall Street Journal the other day. Ben, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me, would you, first of all, what it is that makes IMAX so special, such a big deal?
Yeah, well, the IMAX screens are bigger. They're specifically vertically bigger than most movie screens, and typically they also have higher quality digital sound. And overall, it's just sort of a better, more premium experience in the theater than you get in your typical movie theater.
And yet they are a vanishingly small fraction of the movie theater screens in this country, right?
Yeah, they're less than 1%.
Which makes it treasured real estate that directors like Christopher Nolan, who we'll get to in a second, really want. The company, though, is really interesting because it didn't used to be this way for IMAX.
Yeah, IMAX used to be basically just in museums. You'd see a documentary in a museum. That's what IMAX was until the late 2000s, really. Because you used to have to shoot everything on a special IMAX film camera, and you had to have a theater specially built to show it. And then over time, as things went digital, they were able to convert movies shot digitally into their IMAX format, and they were able to convert auditoriums to show IMAX movies. All they had to do was build a digital screen. They didn't have to rebuild everything from scratch. That's what made it much easier to produce IMAX movies and to show IMAX movies, and that's kind of how they started to go Hollywood.
Interesting. So speaking of going to Hollywood, Christopher Nolan, Dark Knight, right, was a biggie for him. They shot some of that in IMAX. And then most recently, people will, of course, remember Oppenheimer shot in IMAX, and there were, fights over screen time for that. Yep. It's as I said, a rare piece of real estate that directors really want.
Yeah, they really want it because, the box office has been struggling ever since the pandemic. And when people do go to the theaters, though, they tend to want this premium experience. It's really different than what you can get at home. It really feels like this is worth leaving my house for, and I don't mind spending a few extra bucks for it. So movies that are in IMAX are really consistently overperforming and making more money. That's why studios and filmmakers really want to get those screens.
So how do they do it? I mean, not everybody is Christopher Nolan. So how do you call IMAX and say, hey, can we have a screen? How does that work?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, the CEO of IMAX is a guy named Rich Gelfond, and he is one of the most in-demand people in Hollywood these days because he controls what goes on these screens. And usually it's just one movie at a time. And he's planning out 2-3 years in advance now. So people are going to Rich. They're showing him the early ideas for their movie. It could be concept art. It could be previs. It could be the first footage they've shot. And they're saying, this movie's going to be awesome. It's going to be so great in IMAX. People are going to flock to your screens for it. Will you please reserve me a time in, May of 2027 or whatever on your screens?
It's interesting in this piece, you quote him as saying, basically, once we make a deal, we're not going to break it. So, studios and directors can do all the finagling they want. But once he's put it in the calendar, that's what's going to happen.
That's exactly right. That's also why they want to get these screens far in advance, because if you wait till the last minute, they're usually booked. And IMAX does not break their word. For just to take one example, that the Taylor Swift music movie that came out just a couple of months ago, that was only in AMC theaters, and they asked IMAX if they could get those screens, and AMC said, "Sorry, we're already booked for a re-release of Avatar, and we're not going to screw over Jim Cameron. So sorry, Taylor Swift."
That's a clash of titans right there, pal. I'll tell you what.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So it's going to cost me an extra like $3, $4, $5 on top of a $18 movie ticket, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's expensive. So you'd think on the one hand, in an economy where people are kind of anxious that they wouldn't do this, but really it's kind of the opposite. People are not going to the movies as much as they used to. And because it's a special experience, they're willing to pay a bit extra to make it truly special.
You're the professional in this conversation. Would you spend the extra money?
Absolutely. I mean, I love movies. That's why I do this job. And I want to see a movie in the best format possible. And I want to feel like this is not something I could possibly get at home. So I think movies are worth seeing in the absolute best format possible. And if it's a few extra bucks for it, I think it's usually worth it.
You and Christopher Nolan. Ben Fritz at The Journal, covering entertainment. Ben, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it was great to talk to you, Kai.
Marketplace is supported by LHH. LHH believes that recruitment doesn't have to feel cold. Through craft, care, and passion, it can be beautiful. LHH, a beautiful working world. Learn more at lhh.com/beautiful. And by TreviPay, a fully managed B2B payments platform offering zero-touch AR, smart invoicing options, and tools designed to reduce DSO so businesses can spend less time chasing payments. More at TreviPay.com.
This final note on the way out today, which honestly I saw yesterday, and I thought it was a joke, but it turns out not. Apple's got this new product. It costs $230. It is, and I am not making this up, a pouch for your iPhone. This is a quote from the company, inspired by a piece of cloth, sort of a crossbody sling-like thing, $230. Our theme music was composed by B.J. Liederman. Marketplace's executive producer is Nancy Fargali. Joanne Griffith is the chief content officer. Neil Scarborough is the vice president and general manager. And one last thing on this Friday, two names you don't ever hear in these production credits, Steven Sculler and Marcus Gallimay. We moved this week, Marketplace did, from the offices we had been in for almost 25 years. Moving is never fun, much less so when you're trying to downsize a bunch of cranky journalists. Marcus and Steven made that happen, and they did it on deadline, and I just wanted to say a public thank you. I'm Kai Ryssdal. Have yourselves a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you back here on Monday, all right? This is AP.
WNYC is supported